You have to take into consideration the workload that we've been asked to undertake in this generation. And you'll realize that drugs, meaning I'm not talking about specifically pharmaceutical drugs, I'm talking about secular drugs or recreational drugs, i.e. weed or lean or perks or the drugs of the modern time, right? And you realize that people use these drugs as a means of escape from whatever reality that they're trying to avoid, right? And you realize that drugs hasn't been a new phenomenon within the modern paradigm. If you look at the 60s, 70s, and 80s, the drug wars between those periods over crack cocaine, you realize that, well, drugs have always been prevalent in society, especially secular societies, right? So for us, meaning my generation specifically, you will see that drugs is linked with, basic or what you'd call underlying conditions, which is poverty, abuse, or problems in the home, right? Those are the primary conditions or reasons why people in my generation use drugs. And also, the parents within our generation don't take our mental health that seriously. So when you tell them that you're depressed or you have anxiety or any sort of mental fatigue, they shrug it off as, what is there for you to be upset or sad about, right? But they don't take into consideration the modern paradigm that we're living, right? And as studies have shown, our generation is the most depressed generation in the history of the world, which is kind of funny, thinking that our ancestors were enslaved, right? So, for example, if you look at the advent of social media and what it has brought to our generation, the idea of perfection and wanting to look perfect for the world, that leads to depression, because you are now connected with everyone in the world, and you're living or you're seeing the lives that they're living, and you compare it to your situation. And there's a saying that comparison is the thief of joy, and it's true. So when you start to compare your life to those that you see on social media, which is just face value, there's no depth to it. So all they're showing you is the happy times that they have. They aren't going to show you when they're sad, primarily, right? And you compare that to your life, you begin to feel, left out, that you're doing something wrong, that you need to fix this, that you need to fix that. And in reality, you really don't need to. But for those that do choose that path, that they need to fix that reality, they turn to some sort of drug to help or cope with the anxiety that they feel, the social anxiety that they feel. And also, if you take a look at, let's say, the age at which people start taking drugs or alcohol, it's primarily in your teenage years, right? And studies have also shown that people who take drugs in their teenage years are more likely, or 6.5 times more likely, to become addicted to drugs in the future, right? So you see a correlation between those who start taking drugs early and those who are coming from a certain background or paradigm, where the persons who are coming from such paradigms are the ones who start taking drugs early. So it's not a case where you are going to eradicate the use of drugs completely, but we can do something to curb it. And it is indeed, and it's a necessity, because I don't believe anyone should be smoking weed 10 times for the day, right? Like, that's not a recreational depression or a depressive way that you're trying to express yourself. It's more of an addiction. And many people are addicted to weed and don't want to admit it. Many people are addicted to alcohol and don't want to admit it. And it's not just in our generation, it's overall. Because if you look at the drug dealers that were back in the 90s and the 80s or the 70s, where are they now? Their fathers, their grandfathers. So we are kind of inheriting a legacy of drug trade, but we've converted that into drug use. So before we used to be the drug dealers, now we're the drug users. And we have to cut that out as a society as a whole. It's not just specific to the black community, although I'm speaking primarily to the black community, but the society as a whole needs to come together and transform the way we relate to our social problems, and not necessarily use a depressant or a suppressant, because the problems are still going to be there once you get off the drugs, and many people don't realize that.
Well, let me hear you say,